By the summer of 1940, Western Europe had collapsed. The German war machine smashed through France and Belgium in a matter of weeks, forcing hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers into a desperate, chaotic retreat to the beaches of Dunkirk. The only thing standing between Adolf Hitler and total European dominance was 21 miles of cold water, the English Channel. To mount a cross-channel invasion, codenamed Operation Sea Lion, Hitler needed to neutralize the British Royal Navy. But to sink those ships safely, the German Luftwaffe first had to wipe out the Royal Air Force and secure control of the skies. If the RAF fell, the island would follow, and without Britain as a staging ground, the United States would have no foothold to eventually liberate Europe, leaving the Third Reich unchallenged. Looking at this chart comparing aircraft numbers in the summer of 1940, the British position looks entirely lopsided. The Luftwaffe fielded well over 2,000 operational fighters and bombers. The RAF had roughly 700. Those 700 machines were flown by fewer than 3,000 young pilots. The defense of the last free nation in Western Europe rested on their shoulders. These were mostly 20-year-old men, operating on little sleep, facing an enemy that had just crushed 6 nations in 9 months. Winston Churchill would later refer to them as the few. Britain could not survive a raw war of attrition. To hold the line, the RAF had to develop a system that could offset a 3-to-1 numerical disadvantage through sheer efficiency. The solution turned the entire island into a single organism. The British built the world's first integrated air defense network. The architect behind this was Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding. He realized that whoever controlled information controlled the airspace. Dowding anchored his system with Chain Home, a network of towering radar stations dotting the coastline. By bouncing radio waves off incoming targets, these towers could detect German formations gathering over France, stripping the Luftwaffe of the element of surprise. This was paired with the Ultra program, where codebreakers at Bletchley Park intercepted and decrypted secret German Enigma communications. Often, the British knew the Luftwaffe's intent before the bombers even left the runway. All this raw data flowed into centralized command rooms. Here, operators translated radar pings and ground observer reports into physical markers, pushing them across massive maps to track the exact location, speed, and altitude of enemy swarms in real time. Because command always knew where the Germans were, they didn't have to keep planes patrolling blindly. They could hold fighters on the ground and scramble them to intercept with precision, allowing their small force to meet the Luftwaffe's superior numbers with maximum impact. But by August 1940, the Luftwaffe realized they were fighting in network, and they changed tactics. German bombers began pounding RAF airfields, radar towers, and communication lines directly. The toll on the pilots was immense. Men were flying up to 5 sorties a day, and the life expectancy for a fresh fighter pilot dropped to just 4 weeks. The Dowding system infrastructure began to fracture under the weight of the assault. Telephone cables were severed, and forward operating bases were reduced to cratered ruins. Despite the intelligence network, the sheer math of attrition was winning. The RAF was losing aircraft and experienced pilots faster than it could replace them, leaving the defense network days away from total collapse. Then, in late August, an operational error altered the course of the war. A lost German bomber crew, trying to lighten their load, dropped their payload on civilian London instead of a military installation. Believing this was a deliberate escalation, Prime Minister Winston Churchill ordered a retaliatory bombing raid on Berlin. Adolf Hitler was furious. In an emotional reaction, he commanded the Luftwaffe to pull their focus away from the crippled British airfields and radar stations. The German war machine pivoted to the Blitz, a systematic terror bombing campaign directed at London and other cities. Millions of homes were damaged, and over 40,000 civilians were killed. The horrors inflicted on the streets of London provided the operational breathing room the RAF required. With the airfields no longer under constant attack, ground crews patched runways, communication lines were repaired, and exhausted pilots finally found a chance to rest. On September 15, 1940, the Luftwaffe launched a massive daylight armada across the Channel, expecting to sweep aside a broken enemy. Instead, they were met by a revived, coordinated Royal Air Force. The Germans lost 56 aircraft compared to the RAF's 27. The ratio of losses demonstrated that the Luftwaffe could no longer operate over southern England during the day without suffering crippling attrition. Realizing he could not win air superiority, Hitler indefinitely postponed Operation Sea Lion, abandoning his plans to invade the British Isles. The pilots provided the courage to stand at the front line, but the architecture of radar and intelligence gave their efforts the strategic scale needed to preserve the island as a staging ground for the eventual liberation of Europe.